Hari Om. Start with the prayer. Om Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Bande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Amadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. Hari Om. So we are addressing that knowledge itself can be of the two types. One is the Vritti Jnanam, another is called Swarupa Jnanam. So Swarupa Vishaya Jnanam or Swarupa Vritti Jnanam versus the objective Vritti Jnanam. So all other, in terms of the analysis wise, when we say that I have a knowledge of this or knowledge of that, particular knowledge is due to removal of the ignorance of the particular object. So chemistry ignorance is removed by chemistry knowledge, and that knowledge cannot eliminate the other ignorance. So I am differentiating in this Vritti Jnanam a particular knowledge of difference. So even though knowledge is not, knowledge itself is differentiable, knowledge of, because we cannot define pure knowledge. Pure knowledge is these epistemologically you cannot even say what is pure knowledge. I can only define knowledge of X, knowledge of Y. So knowledge is only is objectively defined with respect to objective knowledge or objectifiable knowledge. So I can say I have chemistry knowledge, I have physics knowledge, I have knowledge of the world, I have knowledge of this and all that, and that differs from the knowledge of things that I don't know. So in every objective knowledge, I am becoming a knowledge of smaller and smaller and smaller, or specialization of smaller, and my ignorance of all other things are also growing so much. Because I don't know, I am super specialist in particular knowledge, and I have no knowledge of other specialities, so I have to go to another person who is specialized in that knowledge. That's why we have in the hospital varieties of super specialists, and each one knowing only their particular field. Why? It's an objective knowledge, and therefore we are differentiating, right, at this level one knowledge from the other. So knowing one knowledge, one doesn't know the other knowledge. If I have chemistry knowledge, I won't know the physics or astronomy or other. I have to learn that particular field again. So knowledge of is different. And in every knowledge is involved because there is a consciousness subject is involved. That's why we said existence of the knowledge or the knowledge of objective knowledge always associated with the subject I, a conscious entity. I cannot remove the subject and have an objective knowledge. Objective knowledge depends on the subject, and whereas the subject can be known without the objective knowledge. So one is independent and another is dependent. But in all this objective knowledge, the thought of objective knowledge arises, and when it knows spontaneously, I am a knower of this, I am a knower of this thought, I am a knower of this thought. So all objective knowledge translate to in terms of thoughts. And the thoughts, whether it is through the senses outside or from the memory from inside, ultimately it is a vritti. Vritti means a perturbation in the mind, and the perturbation of the mind is known by light of consciousness that is reflected from the mind and falling on the thought and back to the mind. So mind, when it goes back to the mind, I have an object of the thought or objective knowledge, and also spontaneously I am a knower of this objective thought also arises in the mind. So both subject thought and the object thought, aham vritti, idam vritti, arises whenever the idam vritti arises. Aham vritti spontaneously rises because the consciousness is all the time illumining that mind which is there. If the mind itself is folded, then senses will not bring information or mind will not record it. Now let's analyze a little bit more because of the mind itself in terms of knowledge of this when we're looking about the memory aspect or when we're looking about the objective perceptual data of it, or also the inferential data that brings only from the mind. It's not again sense input, but it's input from the basis on the logical analysis of, again based on previous pratyaksha, because logic has to be supported by pratyaksha data. Data is perceptual data. But in the case of happiness, anger, all the emotions and all that, I am aware of that. So I am happy. How do you know? What do you mean, how do I know? I know I am happy. That means it is a mental mood where mind is a calm, quiet, contented in those moments, and I say I am happy. That means my light of consciousness illumining the mind without any perturbation. So what is happiness now? Happiness that I see is a mental absence of the mental moods where the mind is calm and quiet. How about anger? Anger is again agitations in the mind. So every time all other agitations disturb the mind. Whereas happy state is contented mind where the mind is calm and quiet. So all are being illumined by the pure consciousness through the Chidabhasa. So how do I know that my mind is calm and quiet? That means there is no feedback and the mind is unperturbed, and that I am conscious of the unperturbed mind, and I all say I am happy. So happy state and all that, it is attributed to as though it is Sakshi Jnanam or witnessing conscious Jnanam. That means local Kutastha Chaitanya is illumining the mind. It is the mind, a quietened mind, that mind is aware of, a quietened state of mind, and that mental awareness of the quiet mind is happy mind. Mental state of awareness of the agitated mind is the one who says, I am angry, I am jealousy, all those other passions and or emotions that disturb the mind, or vrittis or modifications of the mind, and we will know it. My mind only knows. When the mind itself is folded in the deep sleep state, I will not have any of this, but I will have a mind which is folded. There it is the absence of subject as well as object knowledge. Whereas in the case of the waking state, when I say I am happy, there the happiness is awareness of the quietened mind. By who? By the Chidabhasa only. Because pure consciousness, all pervading, has nothing to do with this. So when we say it is Sakshi Jnanam there, Sakshi means witnessing consciousness. Witnessing consciousness, neither Pramata, is neither a knower or non-knower, because it is pure consciousness, all pervading. But locally it is illumining and it's reflected in all its glory because the mind is calm and quiet. And that state of mind is a happy state of mind. But I attribute the happiness because I got that happiness from the quietened mind. That means no more thoughts in the mind. Whereas now, when we look at the knowledge of Brahman, Brahman is not an objective knowledge, but it is self-revealing knowledge when I remove the abstraction. And we gave an example of clouds covering the sun. So what do I have to do to see the sun? So do I have to do anything in order to see the sun? Put another light on it to see the sun? So all I have to do is remove the clouds. So when the clouds are removed, then what happens? The sun shines by itself and sun is seen. Then I don't have to do anything because the sun is self-shining entity, self-luminous entity, therefore it reveals itself. That's what is the Chaitanyam Brahman knowledge also. What I am doing now through the process of this, the study of Vedanta, or through meditation process or through the knowledge, I am removing this ignorance that is as though covering the Brahman. Just as I am removing the clouds as though covering the sun. I could see the clouds only because of the sunlight only. I know that I am ignorant only because of the knowledge. So knowledge of anything is through the consciousness only. But I am paying attention in the process to the vrittis only, forgetting that it is the light that really getting reflected. Just as when I am seeing in the full moon night, the objects in the moonlight, and when I look at the objects in the moonlight, I say I am seeing the object. What I am seeing is actually the sunlight falling on the moon, getting reflected by, so it is the sunlight now, reflected sunlight, falling on the object and getting further reflected and coming back to my eye or to my mind. Therefore, I say there is an object there that I could see in the sunlight. I am paying attention to the form of the object, forgetting that it is the sunlight that I am seeing through this process. Same thing happens in the light of consciousness also, because light of consciousness has to illumine everything. So every knowledge of, please carefully, every knowledge of involves a consciousness plus this which is inert, the existence expressed in the form of this. So Brahman himself, as though expressed in the form of existence, is in the form of a thought, and the thought is essentially I am illumining, and it is a reflected light of consciousness from the thought. The contents of the thought is what I am seeing as the contents of the knowledge. So when I am paying attention to the contents and forgetting the light of reflection, and I say this is the chair thought, this is a table thought, this is a chemistry thought, this is a physics thought. So I am only paying attention to the contents of the thought, forgetting the fact that what I am seeing is only reflected light, reflected consciousness that's coming in. So says in the all other vritti, phalam vritti means where there is a result involved. Phalam is result. There is a result involved. That means I know now chemistry, I know this chair, I know this object. So that is a direct result. So in all these, what I am is there is a direct relationship of the ignorance and the knowledge. I don't know chemistry before. That means I have ignorance of chemistry which I know, because I know I don't know, and now I know. So both ignorance and the knowledge, now I know. Before that I knew ignorance, now I know the knowledge. But I am the knowing principle which could illumine the absence of the knowledge of chemistry before, now the presence of the knowledge. That is what happens in the vritti jnanam. But in every this, there is a consciousness is involved. Let's not forget that. So it is knowledge of. So in every knowledge is involved. Knowledge is nothing but consciousness involved. But I am not paying attention to it. I am only paying attention to the objective knowledge. In the case of Swarupa Jnanam, that means Brahman itself is a nature of knowledge, because Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma. So how am I going to know Brahman? I cannot know Brahman. So Advaita also says, as what Ramanuja is criticizing, Advaita agrees that Brahman cannot be object of knowledge. Then how are you going to know? You say, I have self-ignorance, it has to be removed, then only I will have Brahman knowledge. Brahman knowledge is not obtained by vritti phalam. It's not a result of removing something and as a result of a thought process. So I cannot think of Brahman, because Brahman cannot be thought. Yad manasa namanute yenahur manomatam tadeva brahmatvam viddhi nedam yadidam upasate. So in the very teaching of that by Kenopanishad, it says that then manasa namanute, that which mind cannot think of. So it's not a thought process. But it says yan manasa namanute yenahur manomatam, that because of which mind can think of. So because of which all knowledge takes place, that is consciousness. So Sureshwara Acharya gives a very simple example to illustrate this. In the Naishkarmya of Siddhi, in the 3rd chapter, he says, suppose I enter a pitch dark room. I don't see anything. So what do I have to do? I put torchlight. So when I put a torchlight, what do I see? I see different objects. So now I focus my torchlight, I see chair, I see this and all that. So every object is being revealed as I put torchlight on it. So light of illumination is falling on a particular object. So every knowledge of this occurring, like it could be chemistry knowledge, it can be physics knowledge, it can be knowledge of Gaga Boo or knowledge of anything that we see, the whole world knowledge. There I had to use a light of beaming light for me to know. And that means light of consciousness has to be focused on the particular thoughts. That's what is the knowledge of. Suppose then in that pitch dark room I see a pot there. And interestingly the pot is upside down as though it is covering something. So out of curiosity I go there and I remove the pot. Then what do I see there? I see a candle there burning there. Now should I put a torchlight on the candlelight for me to see the candlelight? No, because I don't need any more torchlight, because once I remove the pot, the candle is burning already and it is the light of source light, then I can see directly. I don't need any more torchlight. I don't need a light to see the light, because it is the light of consciousness because of which I see everything else, and I don't need a light to see the light. That's why it's called Jyotir Jyotihi, Swayam Jyotihi. That is light of all lights, and I don't need a light to light it. That's exactly what Swarupa Jnana means. I had to remove the pot for me to see the light there. So the prakriya or the effort is required for me to look at it, and the torchlight is required to see the pot. Up to that is what is called vritti is there. So I had to study Vedanta, I had to listen to the scriptures and analyze deeply in terms of the shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasitavya. I had to logically understand it without any doubt and then contemplate on it. How long? Until the end of your life itself, because that's what the requirement is. And it gets revealed slowly as it abides into yourself. Therefore, the Brahman knowledge is different from the knowledge of any vritti. And that's what is Advaita Vedanta says, is that you don't need a vritti, but you need an effort to do it to remove the obstruction that is covering. Obstruction is in the mind. Obstruction is because of wrong notions. So wrong notions have to be eliminated. So when Bhagavan Ramana says, when you are looking at the world and say you want to know it is mithya, and by knowing the objective knowledge that it is mithya, you will know Brahman. So how can you know that by knowing that this is mithya, that how do you know Brahman? What we are saying is, we have removing in that mithya. Mithya means what? It is a basis of the sat, the adhishtanam. It has the basis of the Brahman as the very basis. So what I am removing in that is the superficial attributive knowledge, and look at the content of the knowledge is nothing but Brahman only. That means when I am looking at the thought, what I am seeing is, I am seeing the reflected light of consciousness. I need a thought for me to know the thought, but I am paying attention to the contents of the thought. But it says, pay attention not to the contents of the thought, but that because of which the thought is known. That knowledge is not a vritti phalam, but it is recognition of your own self. It is recognition, not something to be knowing as a new knowledge, but it is a realization or reanalyze the situation to detect what is there involves superficial aspect, and when I reject the superficial aspect as not real, then the underlying I have to use my viveka to discriminate that, to recognize myself. So this is called a Swarupa Jnanam. It's not a Phalavrutti. All other things are objective knowledge. So therefore, Bhagavan Ramanuja's criticism saying that you are differentiating two knowledge and that's not valid, is valid because of these are two difference. The fact of the matter is, even Bhagavan Ramanuja uses the same argument to justify it also. So he uses the same argument that there are two knowledges. In fact, in the Visishtadvaita, there is called the two knowledges are differentiated. One is called the knowledge of the objective knowledge, another is called the subject. So it's called Dharmic Jnanam and Dharma Bhuta Jnanam. Those who are familiar with the Visishtadvaita, you differentiate the two knowledge. One is called Dharmic Jnanam. That means a knowledge of the self, because self itself is an object of knowledge, and one can know himself also. So he accepts that in one side, but uses the same argument that you are differentiating two knowledge. Well, he is doing the same thing too. He has Dharmic Jnanam and Dharma Bhuta Jnanam. And so exactly same analysis is being used. So that argument, criticism, is not really valid in terms of differentiating that knowledge that Advaita does is what he does also. That's involved because self-knowledge differs from the objective knowledge. This is the basis of it. So we will take next talk, a little bit more analysis of Visishtadvaita, where exactly the difference between the Visishtadvaita and Advaita, and what is our logical and why one prefers the other also we should analyze. This we will do the next, and with this we will stop here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyati. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.